Hey there, welcome back. I'm Mallory, the weight loss habits nutritionist, and today we're talking about three big mistakes you're making on your weight loss journey. And if you're on YouTube, you'll probably see behind me, I have a very different backdrop than normal, and it is a mess. So we just moved and we're working on getting my office together, but so far there is just a lot of everything all over because it is the last room that we're working on. So we just moved to a new apartment. It's been a big adventure and we realize we have a lot of stuff. So we're trying to figure out what to do with it all. So right now it is all piled up behind me. If you're on the podcast, lucky you, you don't have to be distracted by what's going on in the background. All right, so let's talk three big mistakes on your weight loss journey. So when it comes to weight loss, there are countless mistakes that I've seen. And some, honestly, it's kind of funny because you can make it work pretty much any way you want, but there are certain things that make weight loss much, much harder. So these are the three that I see most commonly with my clients and that I know that I have made as well. So I am very curious if you've made these mistakes too. Go ahead and listen on and we will talk about them. The first is that you have an all or nothing mindset around food. With weight loss, this type of mindset is really, really common. Many diets will say, here's a list of foods that you can have and foods you can't have. And these are bad and these are good. I've done entire episodes on why good and bad foods don't exist. But when you have this mindset where it's all or nothing, it's black and white, it's a lot harder to maintain your weight loss because you're constantly dealing with some cognitive dissonance, which basically means your mind it's fighting with itself over what to believe. And there's so much confusion in the weight loss space anyway. So believing that something has to be a certain way or it's not going to work doesn't help. So with this all or nothing mindset, the most common thing I see is someone will say, well, I can't have those foods. And then they will list off whatever food their most recent diet has told them to avoid. And it really can be super hard to break away from this mindset because it's so common in the weight loss space. It's very common to say you can't do that or you have to do things this way. But given that there's thousands of diets out there and they work to different extents, there's no one way you have to do things. And there's not going to necessarily be the same thing that you're doing that will work for someone else. So when you're trying to lose weight a specific way, it might work great. But then if someone else in your family or in your friend group tries it, they may have no results doing the same thing that gave you results and vice versa. So believing that you can't do it different ways, you have to do it a specific way is problematic all on its own. But you also have that mentality of, if I eat these foods, I failed. Or if I don't do what I say I'm going to do, I failed. So if you're not exercising when you said you would, if you're eating carbs at a party when you said you weren't going to, then this all or nothing mindset where you have the thing you told yourself you weren't going to do or have, you end up basically spiraling. So when you do the thing you claim you're not going to do or that you're not supposed to do, and then you start to mentally spiral around it, rather than moving on and saying, hey, I'm human, I make mistakes, let's forgive and move on, you're probably going to end up having this moment of, well, it's ruined. Nothing is going to work now because I messed up. So everything's ruined. I might as well just eat everything that I have been avoiding for the last few weeks, days, months, whatever you've been doing this diet or however long you've been doing the diet. And so that gives us a guilt thing that doesn't have to be there. When you say, I'm not going to do this, and then you do it, and then you feel bad, and then it just spirals from there. That's not necessary. And when you don't have an all or nothing mindset, and you can free yourself from that to say, hey, if something doesn't go according to plan at this meal, let's just start over at the next meal. Let's get back to our healthy habits, our healthy eating immediately afterward, instead of spiraling for a week and saying, oh, I'll get back on track on Monday. You're going to be more successful. So this all or nothing mindset around food, around dieting, it's really not helpful. So that is mistake number one. Mistake number two, you're focusing mostly on what you can't have rather than what you can add in. So tons of diets say you need to avoid certain foods. Let's see. Keto says you can't have carbs. Paleo says you can't have processed foods. You can only eat what your ancestors would have eaten. You know, like the beef you bought from the dairy or the grocery store, that counts, right? And then you're avoiding all these things. Paleo, I said paleo, I meant to say Atkins, where you couldn't have too much fat and you couldn't have carbs. You're only eating protein. Very similar-ish to keto, where you're also avoiding carbs, but you're focusing on the fat. So you're looking at things in a way that says, I can't have these foods. I can't have processed food. I can't have dessert. I can't have soda. I can't have that. You start obsessing over the things you think that you can't have. Candy is another big one, especially this time of year where we're getting into the holiday season. If you believe you can't have it, your body decides, your mind especially, well, then I want it. It becomes this taboo subject that your body and mind say, if you say we can't, I'll show you, and do it anyway. And again, you get into that guilt spiral that's really not helpful. So focusing on the things that you can't have or the things that you must cut out, which again, not super necessary, but if that's what you're focusing on and you believe that you can't have certain things, then you're going to crave them more and you'll push off the craving for as long as possible. But then when you give in, again, you'll say, screw it, I messed up, I ruined it. I might as well just eat everything else I've been avoiding. So these restrictive mindsets, this all or nothing mindset, the focusing on what you can't have, those are big mistakes with weight loss because it can lead to that like guilt spiral. And when you think about what you can add in, that's when you gain a lot more freedom. You're thinking about, okay, well, if I'm going to have a fit for balanced meal, then I can have protein, I can have a fat source, I can have some sort of fiber, which usually includes carbs because that's where fiber comes from, is carbohydrates. And I can have produce. Let's see what kind of fruits and veggies we can add. You're able to look at it from a very different perspective rather than saying, oh, I can't have those. Now you're saying, here's all the things I can have. And while many diets say there's a bunch of foods you can't eat for weight loss, none of that's true. You can eat any of the foods you like. It just depends on what you're eating with it. So if you're having cake, awesome. Enjoy your cake. Put it with a meal that has other things like protein, fiber, and produce, some sort of balanced meal. Your cake can either be an extra or it can be your fat source. Whatever you want that to look like, you can fit it in. And this is the biggest thing I help my clients with, is finding ways to add in the foods that they've been avoiding. I was talking to someone on the phone the other day. They were saying that they only eat certain types of fruit because they believe they have too much sugar. That's something that diet culture has told us, but that's not necessarily true. Fruit has fiber, it has nutrients, it has all kinds of stuff that is really good for your body, that if you're not eating it, you may be missing out on. And bananas are not the worst nightmare of weight loss. I promise you, if you are overweight, bananas are not your problem. I can guarantee it. Unless you're drinking a ate banana daiquiri every single day, then it's not your problem. So we can add in foods that you enjoy. We can add in foods that are fun and focus on foods as well that are going to nourish your body while you lose weight. And that is what you can add. None of that is restrictive. And it's a very, very different mindset. So, mistake number 3, let's talk about that. This is obsessing over the scale. I see this constantly. If you're on Instagram and you follow anyone who has a weight loss account, or you yourself have a weight loss account, you may have fallen victim to this, or at least seen it, where every single week someone is posting their weight loss progress from that week before by hopping on the scale and saying, oh, I'm up a pound this week. I was terrible. I can't believe this. Or, ooh, I'm down 2 pounds this week. Wow, what a great week. And all they focus on, or all you're focused on, is the scale and what that says. And then you end up equating that number with how good or bad you've been that week. And then it becomes a morality issue, and that can really hurt our self-confidence and our self-esteem. Because I have gotten on the scale before, saw the number higher than I expected because I had been doing everything right on the diet I was on, and I went up 2 pounds on the scale from the week before. And that ruined my whole day because my mindset was that, well, I must be doing something wrong. This isn't working anymore. It's another one that I've heard a lot and have felt a lot. And it just ends up leading again to that spiral of, well, obviously I gained weight this week, so what's the point? I might as well just give up. Or opposite, you lose weight and then you reward yourself with food because you did so good. None of that is helpful because it's not the only indicator. The scale can be helpful over time, but our bodies fluctuate so much from day to day, hour to hour, based on whether you are drinking water, based on what you ate that day, how much sodium you had, how many carbs you had. That can influence your water balance. And it just depends. You may weigh 2 pounds less in the morning than you do at night just because of eating food throughout the day, but that doesn't mean you gained fat over 12 hours. It just means your body is fluctuating. And our bodies fluctuate between 2 and about 5 pounds a day throughout the day. So by looking at the scale and determining our value on the 1 pound you lost over the last week or the 2 pounds that you gained isn't helpful because of that body fluctuation. It's not a good indicator. If you're using the scale where you weigh in once a week and you see, all right, well, in January, I weighed 215 pounds. February, I weighed 210. In March, I was down to 208. May, 205. And I skipped a few months there. I apologize. January, February, March, April. And then maybe May, you go up in weight from where you were in April, but you're still at like 206 instead of 215. That's what you want to look for if you're using the scale, is that downward trend over time. And in between, it's going to be bumpy. But that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It just means that our bodies are not calculators. They're not linear. Weight loss takes time and it takes patience, really. And when you're only focusing on the scale, you're ignoring other things that are indicative of your health and indicative of your weight loss. So when you focus on things like pictures, maybe you take a picture in January and you see, okay, this is where I'm starting from. And then by May, you are wearing a completely different clothing size and your entire body looks different in a picture than it did in January. 5 months of difference, but you don't see more than like 3 pounds down on the scale. I've seen that before, where one of my clients was losing weight very slowly and she was so frustrated. And we didn't do pictures in this case. We did a tape measure, where at the beginning I had her measure her hips and waist to see where she was starting from. And then 2 months in, when she hadn't been losing weight, we took another measurement and she was down 4 inches. Guys, that's insane. That's an entire pant size for a lot of us. 4 inches on your hips or 4 inches on your waist, or it might have been a combined like 2 inches on her waist and 2 inches on her hips. I can't remember exactly, but making that kind of progress doesn't always show up on the scale, but it does show up in photos. It shows up on a measuring tape. It shows up in how your clothes are fitting on you and whether your clothes still fit you because they might be getting looser. Those are things that you may be ignoring if you're only focusing on the scale, and then you don't see the progress you're actually making, which can be really discouraging. So by looking for those, what are called non-scale victories, or NSV if you're on Instagram a lot, then you are able to actually see the progress you're making in the changes over time in your body. You also may have more confidence. You may have more energy to play with your kids or your dog. I don't have kids yet, but I do have a dog. It makes a huge difference if I don't run out of energy playing with her. And those are things that outside of your body are super helpful to make note of. Noticing if you're actually stopping eating when you're full rather than going past full and feeling overly stuffed. If you've gotten to the point where that only happens once a week instead of every meal, that's amazing progress, but you're ignoring it if you're only obsessing over the scale. So those are my 3 big mistakes that you may be making on your weight loss journey. Let me know if those are mistakes that you've made. If you want help moving past these and really digging into creating new habits, I do have some slots open for the rest of the year, and we can really get a jump start on your New Year's resolutions by starting now and giving you a plan to follow during the holiday season. Also, if you're listening to this or watching this before Black Friday, I do have a Black Friday special coming up. Be sure to stay tuned on my Instagram. I'll be posting mostly about it on there, and I'm super excited about it. It's a brand new course that you'll get when you sign up for coaching, and that one will be released on Black Friday. So again, stay tuned. Go over to my Instagram. It's weightloss.habits.nutritionist, and I will see you guys over there. All right, talk to you next week.